Hello, everyone. I'm Mrs. Bearden. I am a librarian for St. Tammany Parish Schools, and I'm glad you could join me today. We are going to read chapter 18 of Lila and Hadley. As we near the end of July, Shelby calls me almost every day. Sometimes she just wants to chat. Other times she asks if we can meet up and take our dogs for a walk or swim at her house again. I always say yes. Ain't like I got anything better to do. She likes to talk a lot. Sometimes when we're talking, she'll go on for a long while about a book or a movie she watched, or tell me about the trouble her siblings get into. I don't mind. It's kind of nice to just listen and not be expected to answer all the time. And when she does ask me questions, she seems real interested in the answer, even if I don't say a whole lot. She never brings up my cane, or how sometimes it's obvious I can't see things. So eventually I do it for her. You know I'm blind, right? I blurted out on one of our walks around the neighborhood. Lila and Pilot are on their leashes walking in front of Shelby and me. Lila's really warmed up to Pilot. She gets all excited when she first sees him, and she don't even seem to mind when he jumps all over her or sniffs her butt. Dogs are so weird. Anyway, she's even started sparring a tail wag or two for Shelby, who seems real pleased by this, considering how Lila ignored her the first day they met. Shelby was mid-sentence, talking about some TV show her little brother made her watch when I interrupted her. I feel bad for a second, knowing cutting her off like that was rude. But she don't seem bothered about it as she turns her head to look at me fully. Yeah, she says after a second. I figured. Not completely blind, I explain. Not yet. Well, maybe not ever, but it will get worse, doctors say. I used to be able to see all right, but now... Well, now I gotta use this thing. I tap the cane on the concrete as we make our way down the sidewalk past a little grocery store. So yeah, I'm legally blind, is what they call it. I can still see, but not real well. Shelby nods. Okay. You ain't said anything about it. Neither have you. I know, but I figured if you wanted to talk about it, you would bring it up, she says. And now you have, so do you want to talk about it? No, I say quickly, and then, maybe? I don't really know. I didn't want to talk about it for a while because I thought talking about it made it more real, and I didn't want it to be. That's stupid, though, and now I got this cane, and that makes it feel more real, too. I shake my head. I guess I just don't know what to say other than it sucks, and it's kind of scary. My mobility teacher, the lady who's teaching me to use this cane, says it'll be easier once I know how to do all the stuff she's teaching me. And just things like walking around like this have gotten a bit easier, I suppose, but still. I look down at the sidewalk. My cane sweeps, scratching across the concrete in time with my steps. I barely notice any sort of ache in my wrists now, and I haven't jabbed myself in the belly with the end in a few days. I'm sorry, I mutter. For what? Asked Shelby, going on and on about this. I know it ain't fun to hear. Oh, I don't mind, she says. I can't say if things'll get easier or better or whatever, but I ain't been in your shoes before. Closest I got is an uncle who's completely blind. Really? Yeah, he was in the military. Lost his sight in an explosion, I think. That's awful. He had a hard time with it at first. He was real angry when it happened. But he's doing all right now. He's got one of those dogs that helps him out. A guide dog, I think he called it. She's real cute. He ended up going to culinary school and is a chef at a fancy restaurant in Lexington now. How does he read recipes? He has the maiden braille, or he has this thing on his phone so it'll read out stuff to him. It's in a kind of robot voice, but he don't seem to mind it. How does he use the oven or the stove? How does he measure stuff? I ask a dozen other questions that run through my mind. I can barely see a lot of that kind of stuff now, and I ain't completely blind yet. I ain't sure about all that, Shelby admits. I know his kitchen is real organized, and he's come up with ways to make it work for him, though. He's a good cook. Grandma started insisting we have Thanksgiving at his house instead of hers, so he can cook for all of us. Oh, now I'm hungry, she chuckles. Anyways, I don't think it was easy for him or anything, but he's doing all right now. I don't know if it'll be the same for you. I hope so, of course, but I don't mind listening if you want me to. Sorry if that ain't much help. No, I appreciate it, I tell her. Everybody else, my sister and my teacher, they all want to talk about it just to tell me it's going to get easier. And maybe they're right. But sometimes I don't want to hear two people who ain't been through this to tell me how it's going to be. I just want to be upset a little, even if it does get easier, even if I end up doing real well like your uncle. It still stinks right now. My mama calls that venting, Shelby says. When she gets home after a bad day and tells my dad about it, sometimes he tries to make suggestions for how to fix things, and it just gets her madder. She says sometimes people just gotta vent. Why is it called venting? No idea, Shelby says. Just what she calls it. So if you ever gotta vent to me, go right ahead. Thank you, I say. I turn my eyes back to Lila and Pilot, still walking just ahead of us. Leash is a little loose. Now that Pilot's gotten used to me and Lila being around, he's actually doing pretty good on a leash. I've got this theory that he and Lila are trying to impress each other, because sometimes as they walk, one of the dogs will look over at the other for a minute and then wag their tail. It's pretty cute, if I'm being honest. We decide to go to the dog park for a little bit to let the dogs run before we separate and go back to our houses. As soon as we're inside the fence and we've taken their leashes off, Lila and Pilot start racing around the dog park. Lila still don't play with the other dogs much, just Pilot. But at least she ain't hiding behind the bench anymore. Shelby and I find an empty seat in the shade, and after we've been sitting for a minute, I say, "Can I tell you something?" "Sure, what?" "When I saw you that day at the picnic tables, I realized you were staring at me. And at first, I got real upset because I thought you were looking at me because of my cane. I thought you were going to tease me about it or something." "Really?" Shelby asked, clearly surprised. Maybe a little hurt. "That'd be awful. I'd never do that." "I know that now," I say. "I was real relieved when I met you here and realized you were only staring because you wanted to be friends with my dog." "And you." "Mostly my dog." "Well, maybe," she says. We both laugh, and I try to ignore the fact that I've just referred to Lila as my dog, even though she ain't mine at all, even though Vanessa says it probably won't be long before we can find her a real home. I shake off the thought. It was just a slip of the tongue. I know she ain't mine, and I got other things I'm worrying about right now. "Shelby," I say, "do you think people at your school will tease me about it?" "About you being almost blind?" "Yeah." I fidget with Lila's leash, which I'm still holding in my hands. "I'm going to be living with my sister for a while, so I'll probably be going to your school when it starts up in a few weeks. No one at my old school really made fun of me about it, but I didn't use a cane. And also, I'd known everyone there since kindergarten, so my vision getting worse slowly like it wasn't a big deal to them. And I'm just nervous about being made fun of, I guess." Shelby takes a minute to answer. When she does, she says, "I don't know. I want to believe they wouldn't. Most people at school are pretty nice. I know my friends Kate and Cassie wouldn't, but I can't say for sure, Hadley. I'm sorry." "Yeah." "But," she touches my arm and waits to speak until I've looked at her. When I do, she's staring back at me real direct. If anybody does act like jerks, just let me know, and I'll kick their butts. She lifts her arm and flexes it with a grin. I can't help but laugh. The idea of Shelby, with her pigtails and her big smile, fighting anyone is pretty silly, but it does cheer me up a bit. Thanks, I say. Anytime. Later, when Lila and I are walking back to Beth's house, I can't help but think that it's interesting. Shelby didn't try to make any promises about how things would get better or easier, or try to tell me she understood what I was going through, or any of that stuff people often do when they know I'm losing my sight. But she also didn't act like she pitied me either. Instead, she just offered to let me talk and promised to be there for me if I needed her to. To my own surprise, I believe her. And for the first time in a while, I do actually feel a little better, a little less angry and afraid about what'll happen in the future, at least where me and my eyes are concerned. Well, thanks for listening as we read chapter 18, as you hear the thunder. If you want to hear more like this, you can go to stpsb.org, and don't forget, keep learning and keep reading.